The Green Bay Packers are the better team, they're the healthier team, they're the more well-rested team, and they're at home. For all those reasons, to me, even though they are the smallest of the favorites this week and everyone else at least a touchdown or more, Green Bay right around 3.5 to 4, depending on where you get it, I would be very surprised if Seattle wins this game. I've got Green Bay. That is not just due to my commitment to take integrity of the Green Bay Packers making it to the Super Bowl, which you and I both had prior to the year, and that pick will be tested mightily if both the favorites win this weekend and Green Bay has a rematch against San Francisco. But Seattle has overachieved this year. Seattle has been brilliant in one-score games. Russell Wilson has repeatedly pulled magic out of his helmet, and I think that is something, by the way, he can continue to do. He has done it over the course of the decade, or a little less than a decade he's been in the league. But I think their season ends here. I think they're too banged up. Dwayne Brown and George Fant didn't practice yesterday. Neither did Mike Iupati. So you have 3 offensive linemen who were not able to practice on a Thursday, getting ready for a Sunday game. Now they're fortunate they're not playing a Saturday game, or else it'd be even more dire straits for them in that regard. Green Bay also has been doing just enough throughout this season to win football games. They haven't been overly impressive. We haven't seen a vintage Aaron Rodgers game in a few months. I wonder if we see it this weekend against the Seahawks defense that in every metric other than turnovers forced is a bottom 10 defense in the league. And if one thing Green Bay does really well, Aaron Rodgers in particular, is they do not turn the ball over. So, Canty, for all those reasons, I like the Packers this weekend. I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll potentially be a high-scoring game because I don't know about the defenses of either of these two teams, but I like the Packers to win this football game.
Yeah, I like the Packers, too. I mean, when you look at the Seahawks and Russell Wilson in particular, Lambeau Field has been a house of horrors for him. Yep. He's 0-3. He's got 6 interceptions to 3 touchdowns and a 60 passer rating. So it doesn't necessarily lend itself to him having his best performance, even though the Seahawks team is 8-1 on the road this season. I look at this Green Bay Packers defense, and they do have the ability to get after the quarterback. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, the free agent that they signed this offseason, those guys combined for 25.5 sacks. So I like this I like the Green Bay Packers being able to take advantage of the matchups that they're going to have with that Seattle Seahawks offensive line. You mentioned the injuries that they're dealing with. It's not an offensive line that was great at being able to keep the quarterback clean as well. They're in the top 10 in terms of hits allowed on the quarterback. So I think it comes down to Russell Wilson's ability to improvise, and we saw that in that game against Philadelphia. If he can extend the plays and he can do enough to allow those receivers time to uncover downfield, I think that's where Seattle actually has a chance. But I'm with Nick on this one. I think that Seattle has been on borrowed time. If you look at their point differential throughout the season, it's one of the smallest for a team that made the playoffs this year. And so it just feels like it's inevitable that they're going to get knocked out.
That point differential number is historically slim for a team to win 11 games. So by the end of the year, their point differential was in single digits. They had the point differential of a 7 or 8 win team. They ended up winning 11 games and then a playoff game, another single-digit victory in the playoff game despite going up against a backup quarterback. And Seattle's defense, twice this year, they held the Eagles to 9 points. Every other week, they are allowing 20-plus points to almost anyone they face. So I just don't think Seattle has the health or the full personnel on defense, as great as Clowney is, in order to slow down a balanced Packers attack. Now, Rodgers has to be better than he's been the second half of the year, but the Packers also don't have to have Aaron Rodgers on a play-by-play basis be brilliant because Aaron Jones throughout the season has been such a reliable running back.
That being said, even though he does have Aaron Jones, how much of this game is going to come back down to the magic that Russell Wilson's going to have to do and essentially the magic that Aaron Rodgers is going to have to do to win this game, which he really hasn't had to do, like Nick said, all season long.
He hasn't had to do it all season long, but it's not like we don't know that Aaron Rodgers can do it. And I think that's
do we know he still can do it?
No, I think he can still extend plays, and I think it sets up well for him this matchup because the Seattle Seahawks defense has the 5th lowest pressure rate of any team in the National Football League this year and the 2nd lowest of any playoff team. The Houston Texans are the worst in the playoff field, but in looking at it, yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers will have the ability to be able to extend the plays if he needs to. And when you look at the matchup that these Seahawks defensive backs have against the wide receivers for the Packers, I mean, the Seahawks their defense is not one of the best defenses when you talk about tackling on the back end. They have the 4th most missed tackles in the National Football League, and the Green Bay Packers have the 5th most broken tackles after catches. So yards after catch is going to be a big factor. There are 8 teams in the National Football League that have 2,000 yards after catch, and the Green Bay Packers are one of them. So that's one thing to watch. When you consider the potential for a sloppy field with inclement weather, you would think that it lends itself to the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers being able to run that scramble drill and hit some big plays in the passing game.
And one thing we know, Seattle's going to run the football whether it is effective or not. That is not just this year. That is not just last year. That is the entirety of their history. You look at their last 6 playoff games. They had a monster rushing game in the wild card game against Detroit a few years ago when they hit 34 for 174. Here are the other rushing performances they've had. 22 for 72, 8 for 29, 14 for 51, 21 for 59, and last week, the pièce de resistance, 17 for 19, including a 12-yard run mixed in there, which means the other 16 carries went for a total of 7 yards, for the entirety of the game. Green Bay does not have a good rush defense. My pal Kenny Clark needs to play better, and he's been banged up, assuming he can go. Seattle's going to run the football. I think Green Bay will welcome them running the football.
Yep.
Even though Detroit ran all over them the last time we saw Green Bay play before the bye, I think they will say the more often you take the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands, the happier we are. The more often you say, we're not going to try to get a first down on first or second down, we're happy with a 3rd and 5 and see what happens, I think Green Bay will take it, and I think that will help Green Bay in order to stay in control of this football game.
And that run game for Seattle probably is safer if there is inclement weather that they are calling for, I'm sure, right, this weekend. All right, for Aaron Rodgers, his first postseason performance in 3 years.
No shot.
None.
Because if you look at the first matchup, Houston won that game by being able to run the football. They ran up almost 200 yards rushing between Carlos Hyde and Deshaun Watson. That defense is much improved since they met in Week 6. And if you look at the last month of the season, since Week 11, you're talking about having the 9th-ranked total defense in the National Football League, but number 1 in some key statistical categories. So I just look at this defense, knowing that it was going to take some time for Steve Spagnuolo to implement his scheme. You realize that these guys are going to continue to improve the more football they play. So I look at this Kansas City Chiefs defense as being a much different defense than Deshaun Watson saw earlier in the season. And for that reason, coupled with the fact that Andy Reid is money after bye weeks and Bill O'Brien might be the worst coach left in the playoff field, I give a huge edge to the Chiefs.
Here's what I do with that Week 6 matchup. I ball it up, and I throw it away because it doesn't matter at all. The Week 6 matchup, the Chiefs did not have their starting left tackle. They did not have their starting left guard. They did not have their best defensive player, Chris Jones. They did not have their second-best wide receiver, Sammy Watkins. And Patrick Mahomes went into the game with a banged-up ankle, and during the game, after being on fire early, got the ankle rolled up on again, and then his effectiveness was totally limited. Despite all that, the Chiefs had a big lead and were en route to increasing that lead when a bizarre play happened where Patrick Mahomes sees a flag thrown, thinks he has a free play, so he throws into double coverage in the end zone. The ball is picked off. The referees then get together and say, that flag we threw, actually, we didn't mean to throw it. So he thought he had a free play, tried to take advantage of it. That flipped the game at one point, and then also there was a sack fumble with 10 seconds left in the half that led to points for Houston. Despite all that, Kansas City had a chance to win the football game. They just couldn't close it. But your point on the defensive turnaround is important. Also, prior even to Week 11, since this game in Week 6, the Chiefs have played one bad game, the Titans game. And that wasn't even a bad game. It was a bad final 5 minutes of the game where they gagged it away. Since then, they have played Green Bay to 1 score without Patrick Mahomes. They've beaten Minnesota without Patrick Mahomes. They went to New England and beat the New England Patriots as the Patriots were on their descent down. The Chiefs right now, you guys joke about it, but it's true. I've been a Chiefs fan my whole life. This is the most well-balanced, the most dangerous Chiefs team of my lifetime. We have had offenses in Kansas City as good or better than this one, last year most notably, but there was also an offense led by Trent Green that was 13-3, Priest Holmes, you had Hall of Fame offensive linemen, but they did not have defenses. In the 90s, you had some spectacular defenses led by Derek Thomas and Neil Smith, but you did not have the offenses to go along with it. Kansas City Chiefs have not since Lynn Dawson led them to Super Bowl IV with Bobby Bell and Willie Lanier and the great defenders behind them. They have not had a team that you could argue has a top-flight offense and a top-flight defense. And I know people don't want to acknowledge the Chiefs have a top-flight defense, but over the course of the season, they're top 10 in every major statistical category. They get to the opposing quarterback, they force turnovers, and the pass defense has been exceptional the final third of the season. Conversely, Canty, you mentioned the Texans' coaching issues. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The other issue for the Texans is this. They have as bad of a secondary as any team in the postseason. Coming to Arrowhead against a healthy Chiefs passing attack, I don't think Houston's going to be able to hold them under 30. So are you going to go to Arrowhead against the defense playing like this and score 34, score 35? I don't think you are, and I think the coaching mismatch is an enormous one as well. So we're in lockstep on this. I would be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if the Chiefs don't win the Super Bowl. Baltimore is a tough team.
Yes.
And if Baltimore loses, Tennessee, as I mentioned, already beat the Chiefs. But I would be shocked if the Chiefs lose this football game, even knowing how many times the Chiefs have had home playoff games only to end in horrifying defeat.
So give me a way the Texans can do it. How do the Texans pull this off if they are going to even come up with a game plan to stop this Chiefs team?
Well, I think it's got to look similar to what it looked like in Week 6. You're going to have to control time of possession. The Texans had the ball 40 minutes in that game, so I think they're going to have to play keep away a little bit with that Kansas City Chiefs offense, just because you know that the Kansas City Chiefs weapons are too much for your defense, especially the guys on the back end, to be able to match up with. So I think that has to be a big part of your formula, leaning on Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson. And Duke Johnson could be the X factor in this game for the Texans as a receiver out of the backfield. That's an area where the Kansas City Chiefs defense isn't very good. So I think that that's an opportunity for Deshaun Watson to exploit. But it's going to have to look a lot like the second half of the wild card game against the Bills and overtime, where Deshaun Watson just takes over. I think Bill O'Brien has got to get him involved in the game early, not just as a thrower, but as a runner with read option, getting him out on the perimeter of that Chiefs defense, because that's when you really put the pressure on defenses. When you have a quarterback that's out there on the edge, has the ability to run, but can also throw the ball down the field, give those receivers time to uncover, I think that's how you put pressure on that Chiefs defense. Another thing that we have to keep an eye on is Juan Thornhill, the safety, being out. I mean, week 17, he has the knee injury, and they're going to ask Armani Watts to fill in a second-year player. We'll see how that goes. You're probably talking about the second most important position group when it comes to continuity and communication beyond the offensive line, the defensive backs. And so being able to make sure you communicate the coverages and the calls between him and Tyrann Mathieu, that's going to be something to keep an eye out on early in this game.
Here's how the Texans win. They have to, for the first time all year, get out to a good start. The only team in the NFL to not score a single opening drive touchdown, were Bill O'Brien's Houston Texans, which, with Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins on your team, that is unspeakable how bad that is, especially when you're an offensive-minded coach. Your opening drive, those plays are scripted. It should be your best offensive series of the game. They haven't scored a single opening drive touchdown all game. They have to take advantage of that injury. I knew you'd bring it up. In their first matchup, DeAndre Hopkins and Kenny and Will Fuller, I think it was, both had critical drops when they were running open. The Chiefs have really shored that part of their defense up, but no Juan Thornhill matters. And if this game is close late, you will feel the fear in the building, in Kansas City. There have been some horrifying home playoff losses. Chiefs' last 8 home playoff games, they are 1-7. They lost a game where they scored 2 touchdowns. Their opponent scored none. They lost a game where the deciding play was a touchdown pass thrown from the quarterback to the quarterback. They lost a game where they didn't punt the entire game but still found a way to lose it. They lost a game where they missed 3 field goals as a 13-3 team in a 10-7 game. They have some awful home losses. And Andy Reid, if the Chiefs go on to win the Super Bowl, Andy Reid's a Hall of Famer, minted. If he has another awful playoff loss, and if it even comes close to that and you feel the team tighten up, I do wonder what the feeling in that stadium is, and if the Texans start feeling like playing with house money here. Fortunately, in the fourth quarter, Chiefs should be up by about 17 points, so I'm not going to have to worry about any of that, but that's how you do it.
A lot has changed since that October matchup. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.